Thank you so much for joining me on the show. I'm really looking forward to talking to you today.
It's great to be on. Thank you for inviting me.
For those who don't know who you are, I wonder if you might tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you?
Okay. Well, my name's Harry Miller. I'm from England, and 2 years ago, I was at my place of work. I run and own a company that employed around about 90 people at the time, and a police officer turned up at my place of work and said that he'd had reports that I was a danger at my workplace to transphobic people, to trans people. I said, well, hold on a minute. I'm not entirely sure about that. I don't think that we have any trans people at my place of work. My place of work is the dock. It's very rough and ready. I honestly don't think that we have any trans people. We may have. I've certainly never had any issue with anybody if we do have. And I just found the whole thing incredibly odd. And I asked him, I said, well, okie dokie. What is it that I've done? He said, you've been making transphobic tweets. We've got 30 transphobic tweets of yours. And I said, well, okie dokie. I said, are any of them a crime? And they said, oh, no, none of them are criminal. I said, well, in that case, why are you ringing me? And he said, I need to check your thinking. And I said, whoa, hold on a minute. I said, so you're a police officer? He said, yeah. And I said, you're here to check my thinking? And he said, yeah. I said, have you any idea what that makes you? And he said, no. I said, like, okie dokie, there's a book by George Orwell called 1984. I said, it's not a police operating manual. It's a dystopian novel. But of course, PC Gull had not heard of George Orwell or 1984. And so the reference was entirely lost upon him. So I said, okay, then just give us a few more details. I said, what exactly is it that I've done? He said, we have 30 transphobic tweets posted by you on Twitter. I said, but none of them are a crime. He said, no. I said, okay, then. Right. In your professional opinion as a police officer, which is the one out of those 30 which you consider to be closest to being criminal? The one that, had I just pushed it a little bit further, it would definitely have tipped over into criminality. And he said, there's a limerick. I said, a limerick? I said, I've not written a limerick. He said, no, but you retweeted a limerick. And I said, what limerick? I said, I don't even remember retweeting limerick. He said, you did. You retweeted the limerick. Anyway, it turned out it wasn't at all a limerick. It was a verse from a feminist song that I'd liked and retweeted it. And I told the police officer that, well, I haven't written that. That's not mine. I mean, it doesn't matter. By retweeting it, you are spreading transphobic hate. And that's one of 30 tweets that we have. And unless you stop this, then we will consider you to be escalating into criminality. So please stop tweeting. And I just said, this sounds like complete and utter nonsense. Now, I'm an ex-police officer myself, so I knew that he was talking nonsense. And unlike most people, having been a police officer, I'm not intimidated by police officers. And I also know the law. And I also know that if I'm not doing anything criminal, then the police have absolutely no business whatsoever in trying to check my thinking, curb my speech, or interfere with me in any way. So I told him this. And we had a long discussion about free speech, etc., etc. Now, I continued to tweet, and the police continued to tell me not to, and I eventually ended up taking them to the High Court. I claimed that they breached my human rights, that they breached my human rights with respect to free speech, and I won. And the judge called the police, he likened them to the Cheka, the Stasi, and the Gestapo. So that was what we ended up going to judicial review. We ended up going to the High Court, and the thing is, when the police presented their evidence, it was absolutely bizarre because of these 30 tweets, there wasn't a single one that even came close to being hateful or personal or unnecessarily antagonistic. I'd said things like, I'll give you an example of some of the things I'd said. One of the things I'd said was that Sheffield women know the difference between lads and lasses. That's it. I tweeted that. Sheffield women, I'm from Sheffield. Sheffield women know the difference between lads and lasses. The police considered this to be so hateful that without necessary intervention, my tweeting would escalate into some unspecified crime. Another tweet that caused the police interest was, I asked the question, who won the 1976 men's decathlon at the Olympics? Asking that question apparently was transphobic because apparently it inferred that Caitlyn Jenner had once been a man, and this was classed as being transphobic. Bizarrely, one of the tweets that I got into trouble for simply said, "Her." That was it. H-U-H. Her. I've no idea what I was saying her to because it was redacted. But the police were absolutely certain that me saying her to the wrong thing was a sure indicator that I was about to escalate into criminality. Now, when we asked them what criminality they had in mind, the only criminality they could think of was that I would end up stabbing somebody or murdering somebody. That's what they said. And it was on this basis that they needed to prevent me from tweeting and expressing my opinion, because naturally, without the intervention, this would escalate to murder and genocide. And I'm not being facetious when I say murder and genocide. The College of Policing, who we went up against, actually state in their evidence that intervening with me was necessary because I'd taken the first step on a 5-step process toward murder and genocide. It's in their evidence. So me tweeting a feminist limerick, me saying her, me asking about Caitlyn Jenner, and me saying Sheffield lasses know the difference between lads and lasses, this was the first step to genocide and murder. And we said, this is nonsense. And fortunately, the High Court agreed.
I suppose what I find, one of the things that I find surprising about this whole story is that while I can understand trans activists or, leftists or even, social media companies like Twitter, I can understand that, or not that I can understand, but I suppose at this point I wouldn't be surprised if they accused you of hate for tweeting these things, despite the fact that these tweets are obviously not hateful to any rational person. But that the police would treat it like this, and that the police would take this so seriously, and that the police would consider these tweets hateful instead of just, brushing this off as like a ridiculous accusation from some silly, Twitter user.
Yeah, well, the thing is, Megan, what in your mind, when we talk about hate, what do you think hate means?
I mean, that's a really good question because I'm not sure that I know. I mean, I don't actually believe in hate speech laws. I don't think that there should be hate speech laws. So I'm not particularly interested, in fact, in putting forth a definition of hate. Obviously, we can use that word in casual conversation to mean strong dislike. So maybe that's the answer you're looking for. I'm not sure.
Well, fortunately, the College of Policing, which controls the police forces in England and Wales, have a definition of hate, and they say hate is hostility, and they say and they define hostility as being antagonism, spite, ill will, unfriendliness, and dislike. So, if you're antagonistic toward an idea, say, then that's hateful. If you dislike a particular group, that is hate. If you feel spiteful or demonstrate ill will to a group, then that is hate. And according to the College of Policing hate crime guidance, if anybody at all, anybody accuses you of having committed some form of hate speech or hate action, non-criminal, but some form of antagonistic speech, or you've expressed some degree of unfriendliness or dislike, for instance, towards transgenderism, then without any evidence at all, you will be placed on a list as a hater. I've got this thing against my name called a non-crime hate incident, and the non-crime hate incident is headed crime report, and I'm down there as the suspect for the offence of transgender hate, even though there was no incident and even though there was no hate. Now, we think that is utterly bonkers. So in my case, whilst Humberside Police, the police force that approached me, they were found to have been entirely in the wrong. In fact, the judge likened them to the Gestapo, the Cheka, and the Stasi in his summary. Bizarrely, the same judge found that the guidance issued by the College of Policing was in fact lawful. Now, we don't really understand how the guidance can be lawful, but following the guidance is unlawful. And that's why we're at the Court of Appeal in London in 2 weeks' time to challenge that apparent anomaly. The other scary thing, Megan, of course, is that anybody can report anybody at any time. So in my case, the person who reported me was granted absolute anonymity by the courts on the basis that they were incredibly vulnerable, and that if I knew who they were, I might get them. So they were granted anonymity. They didn't have to provide any evidence of hate other than these tweets. They can provide it all anonymously, and the police are not allowed to question the reporting. They're not allowed to apply any degree of rationality or reasonableness to the claim. They have to take the word of the victim at face value, because the guidance states that questioning the complainant is in fact an act of hate. Get your head around that one. Questioning the complainant is an act of hate. They call it secondary victimization. And because the police don't want to be guilty of secondary victimization, they simply believe what the complainant says. So in my case, the Mrs. B, this weirdo complainant, the chief suspect for the police, they wrote this in their evidence to the High Court. They said that 80 years ago, I would have been persecuting the Jews. 40 years ago, I would have been persecuting black people. And 30 years ago, I would have been persecuting homosexuals. Well, 80 years ago, I wasn't even alive. So how the hell could I have been persecuting Jews? It's just utterly incredible. And 30 years ago, I was living with a homosexual and a Jew. And I don't recall them ever being scared of me because they thought that I was about to commit some form of genocidal terror upon them. So it's patent nonsense. But the police thought that, well, they didn't think. The police took this statement at face value, and this was the basis of their obsessive persecution of me because I quoted a feminist limerick. It's crazy, Megan. Absolutely nuts.
Well, and not only that, but I mean, you're not persecuting anyone. I mean, to accuse you, to assume that you would be persecuting these, Jews or gay people or whoever is ridiculous because you haven't demonstrated anti-Semitism or homophobia. But, you're not, you tweeted some things. You didn't persecute anyone. I mean, to come to that conclusion is so... it's a huge stretch, to say the least.
Oh, it's a massive stretch. And to be fair to the judge, he said, I mean, he's very damning of the police action. He said there was no chance whatsoever of Harry Miller's tweetings escalating into any form of crime whatsoever. Absolutely none. And he also said that the complainant, Mrs. B, had operated from the outer edges of rationality, all of which was utterly true. But nevertheless, the hate crime guidance, which demands that police forces take every single complaint seriously, that demands that they do not question at all the perspective of the complainant, that demands that no proof of hatred needs to be shown, nor in fact does there need to be any evidence of an incident having taken place. Nevertheless, the police, on the word of one lunatic individual, must record my name, your name, whoever's name, as a non-crime hate incident on a police database. And this gets even more sinister because they keep these records for 6 years and they are disclosable on a pre-employment disclosure and barring services check. So if I were to apply, say, to become the chairman of a charity dealing with, I don't know, trans people or what have you, the police would disclose that I'm a hateful transphobe, and the chances are I wouldn't get that job. So this is really quite sinister and quite nasty. And rather than backing down following our successful challenge of Humberside Police last February, the College of Policing have strengthened their guidance so that now police forces are obligated to record the names, take the names of children, school children, who commit hate crime in a school. So if a 15-year-old girl objects to having a 16-year-old male penis in her changing room, and she says as much, she can now be reported for a hate crime, and she will end up with a non-crime hate incident, which will be disclosable when she applies for a job for the next 6 years. That's just crazy, nuts, cruel, and it completely and utterly shits all over childhood and shits all over justice. It's entirely wrong.
It's insanity. I mean, it sounds exactly like 1984. You know, the idea that somebody can anonymously report you for thought crime, and the police have to take it seriously, and they can't question it. They have to just treat it as though it is whatever this person, who we don't even know who they are, has accused you of.
Yeah, of course. It strikes at the heart of everything that we understand about natural justice. It's just wrong that the idea that you can accuse somebody of a non-crime crime, that's what it's called. It's called a non-crime crime. I've got the paperwork. It says it, non-crime crime. This is Orwellian doublespeak made flesh and on a police paper. And these have real world consequences. You know, I don't think I would get a job. I think I've scuppered my chances because my name is up there as a hateful transphobe. You know, the police, an assistant chief constable went in the newspapers to say that I was a hateful transphobe, and that had they not intervened, that my behaviour showed signs of escalating something much more serious. It's bullshit. It's absolute, utter nonsense. But once you've been tarred with that brush, it's very difficult to shake it off. Now, I'm in the fortunate position of not really giving a damn. You know, I've got a source of income. I've got a reasonable retirement fund. I just don't care. But I'm one of the very lucky few who can afford not to care. The vast majority of people actually must care. They must be very careful about what they say, particularly if you're, and you imagine a kid, imagine a 15, 16-year-old. I remember the nonsense that I used to spout when I was 15 or 16, just stuff that I'm now incredibly embarrassed about. But that's what 15 and 16-year-olds and 14-year-olds do. They talk nonsense. But now, if a teacher wishes to report them, they can do. If a fellow student wishes to report them, they can do. If a parent of a child, overhears at the dinner table what another child has said, they can report them. And they're going to be carrying this record around with them for at least 6 years. And that's just utterly crazy, absolutely crazy. And that's why I set up my organization, Fair Cop, to challenge what the police are doing. So the next installment of that is in 2 weeks' time, when we're at the Court of Appeal, demanding that the College of Policing withdraw this draconian, cruel, child-hating, people-hating, human-hating guidance. It's got to go.
Is this a new guidance? How long has this system been around for?
Well, this guidance came into being in 2014, and since then, there have been at least 120,000 non-crime hate incidents. People like me who have been recorded without any trial, without any evidence, without any comeback, without anything. I am the first person in the UK to push back against this. I think I'm probably one of the first people in the UK to discover that these non-crime hate incident records existed. I'm certainly the first person in the UK to say, to kick up a fuss about it and say this is just all kinds of wrong. And the more you look into it, the crazier it becomes. So, for instance, the College of Policing insist that these non-crime hate incidents are necessary in order for the police to gather a picture of hatred towards vulnerable groups, in order to stop crime happening. So we put in a series of freedom of information requests to every police force in England and Wales, asking them how many crimes they'd managed to prevent as a result of collecting these non-crime hate incidents. Do you know the answer? Big fat zero. Not a single crime has been prevented as a result of these non-crime hate incidents being collected. Not a single one. The other scary fact is that most police forces had no idea that they were there in order to prevent crime. Most police forces used non-crime hate incidents as an end in themselves. They just threaten you with a non-crime hate incident, and most people at that point simply shut up, because that's the rational thing for most people to do. When a police officer, who by definition is a person of authority, says, okay, you're not breaking the law, but if you keep doing that, you will be breaking the law, and now we're putting you on a hate crime database, the vast majority of people will simply comply. So job done. These non-crime hate incidents have got nothing to do with collecting intelligence in order to protect vulnerable people. They're everything to do with silencing people who offer dissent toward whatever the ideology is at the time. Interestingly, the College of Policing used these to apparently to protect 5 different groups. So they protect homosexuals, they protect the old, they protect the disabled, they protect religion, ethnicity. I've got one of those wrong actually, but and gender identity. What they don't attempt to protect is women. So you have this peculiar situation where you can say, God, you're an absolute bitch to a woman. That's not a non-crime hate incident. But if you say, oi, you're a man, to a man who thinks he's a woman, that is a non-crime hate incident. Or if you say sir to someone who would rather be called ma'am, that's a non-crime hate incident. But wolf whistling at a woman, calling a woman a bitch, these don't count. These don't count, because women who in the UK are killed at a rate of 2 a week are not classed as vulnerable, whereas trans people who are killed at a rate of 1 every 10 years are classed as vulnerable. So that's the lunacy that we are in. And if you point that out, that also is a non-crime hate incident. So you better shut up about it.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that it is that women aren't protected under these, guidelines, regulations? Because, we have the same situation with Twitter where it's, you can't criticize gender identity, but apparently you can say whatever you want to women. In other words, sex isn't hate speech. That's sex-based hate speech. Let's say that hate speech that's directed at women doesn't count. And I don't even want to call it hate speech, because often what people are accused of breaking the rules for on social media, for example, with regard to gender identity, is not hate speech at all. In my case, I was, of course, kicked off Twitter for saying men aren't women and for referring to a male as he. I didn't insult him.
No.
But why do you think it is that women, who are still half of the population, are still not protected, but this very tiny minority of people who identify as transgender are suddenly, supposed to be, protected from any kind of comment that disrupts their preferred, I don't know, ideology, worldview, view of self, so on and so forth?
I think because protecting women, like protecting black people or ethnic minorities, takes real police work. And the police would rather not do real police work. They would rather do the pretend police work. It's so much easier. It's so much easier to come after me because I retweeted a limerick, or come after you because you used the wrong pronoun, than it is to actually stop real racial hate or real misogynistic violence. That's difficult police work, and the police would rather not engage in difficult police work when they can tick all the boxes by engaging in this pretend police work. That's the only reason that I can come up with. There isn't another reason. I mean, since this hate crime legislation or hate crime guidance came into being, we've had, I think this last year there were something like 70,000 instances of racially motivated crime. 70,000. That's a lot. Now, these non-crime hate incidents are supposed to have reduced that, but they haven't. We've seen something like a 40 or 50% increase in actual violent crime, racially motivated violent crime, since this hate crime guidance was issued. But no, dealing with that would take proper police work, and the police aren't bothered about dealing with proper police work when they can deal with the likes of you and I. That's the only reason for it.
And what about more broadly? I mean, this isn't just connected to what the police are doing or what the police are pretending to do, perhaps in the UK, but a lot of progressive people, mainstream media, the liberal media, whatever you want to call them, again, social media companies, progressive political parties, politicians have been captured by this view that trans-identified people are the most marginalized population on the planet, and apparently that, women don't need protection at all, because of course, most of us who criticize or question gender identity ideology or policies or legislation, we do so because we have concerns about the impact on women and girls. And I wonder why you think it is that people have diverted their focus again to this small minority of people.
Okay, so we did have a problem in the UK with the police and racism. There's no two ways about that. And this most famously manifested itself with the stabbing of a young black lad called Stephen Lawrence in the 90s. Now, following following that that horrendous stabbing, which was committed by a bunch of white supremacist thugs from London. The police showed utter indifference to the inquiry, and total and utter indifference, which is why to this day I don't think anybody's been no, I don't think there's anybody in prison for it even today. I might be wrong on that, but regardless, the police were appalling because they stereotyped black people as perpetrators, or if they weren't perpetrators of violence, then they were simply lying whiners. And you know, who believes a lying whiner? It was probably a drug deal gone wrong, or you know, it's just typical stereotypical behavior by the police. And Lord Macpherson wrote a report into what had gone wrong, and he absolutely slated the police for their systemic racism and their absolute failure to treat communities with respect. So when a black person came to the police and said such and such has happened, the police would just whatever, not believe them, not take them seriously, and dismiss them. So it's from that basis that this has all happened. Okay, so again, rather than actually tackling what Macpherson told the police to tackle, which was systemic racism within their own ranks, they took a much easier option, and the much easier option was to take the lessons relating to race and find a much easier solution than actually dealing with that problem. So then this group Stonewall, who are the great LGBTQ plus lobby in the UK, they jumped in and they said, it's not just race though, police, is it? Look how badly you've treated the homosexual community over the years. And the police, feeling a little bit raw, went, oh God, yeah, you're right. So Stonewall then managed to somehow persuade the police that the lessons taught by Macpherson with regard to race actually apply to the LGBTQ community better. And for whatever reason, the police bought this lie. It was a complete and utter rainbow-coloured Trojan horse. So the police have forgotten about the whole race thing, pretty much. And they're now entirely focused on the LGBTQI part, not so much the L part. They don't really give a toss about lesbians, but gays, bisexual men, and trans women, and all the other the multitude of never-ending gender identities that are coming out of the Stonewall factory. They're really interested in policing them because it's so much easier than doing what Macpherson told them to do, because, like I said earlier, that has to do with real issues based on race. This is so much easier to make sure that we use the right pronouns, to protect all these imaginary identities. I mean, there's a police website recently that was promoting over 260 identities, 260, including, get this, Tetris gender. You know what Tetris gender is? Tetris gender is inspired by the game Tetris. So Tetris gender is a gender which builds up like a game over time, and just as it's completing, it goes and starts all over again. Now, if you don't accept that Tetris gender is as real a thing as being a woman, then you are guilty of a hate crime. And the police are going to come down on you really, really strongly on that one, because it's easier than tackling racism. That's why.
Right. So tell me about some of the other cases that are similar to yours. You know, who else has been accused of similar thought crime?
Okay, so my friend Sarah Phillimore, who's in Fair Cop, she's a barrister, family law barrister, actually an award-winning family law barrister. She's been accused of religious hate because she put on Twitter that my dog's a Methodist. Sorry, no, my cat's a Methodist. Somebody reported her because apparently saying my cat's a Methodist implied that Methodists went round people's gardens shitting and pissing on the flowers, and this was a sure sign of hate towards Methodists. And well, I think it's Wiltshire Police have taken this absolutely seriously, and she now has a non-crime hate incident against her name. I know of a vicar from the southwest who contacted me a few months ago because I think it was a Romany family, a Romany gentleman had approached him and said, "Could you baptize my grandchild into your church?" And he said, "Yeah, no problem at all. But the usual protocol is that, one, I need to see the parents, not just the grandparents, and two, you'll need to come along to the church for at least 2 weeks before the christening." And then the guy said, "Well, we aren't going to do that." And he said, "Well, in that case, I'm not going to christen your child because them's are the rules." And the guy said, "You're doing this because I'm a Romany," and reported him for a non-crime hate incident. So he's got a non-crime hate incident against his name. We have the MP for, I think it's Ipswich, Tom Hunt, who has a non-crime hate incident against his name because he wrote in his local paper that if it can be shown that there is a particular group who are responsible for a disproportionate amount of crime in this area, should we not be able to talk about it? That's all he said. And a Labour Party member reported him, said, "Oh, you were referring to, we could tell you were referring to the Romany community, hate crime." And the police reported him. So this is happening all the time. This is happening all the time. And this is how fast you can do it. You can go on a police portal called True Vision. There's a scary name for you. And without putting in any of your own personal details, you can report anybody for anything. And it takes 3 minutes and 45 seconds to ruin somebody's life for the next 6 years. I know this because that's how long it took me to report myself. I experimented with the True Vision website a few weeks ago, and I put the clock on it. 3 minutes, 45 seconds. I reported myself for something completely and utterly nonsensical with a few screenshots, and that was it. The next thing I knew, there was a telephone call from the police force asking me asking me for more details about the person I was complaining about. I didn't let on that I was complaining about myself. But yeah, that's how quick it is. 3 minutes 45
That's an amazing response time.
Boom. Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. Now, the weird thing is, I'd complained to Lincolnshire Police, and I'd given my name as somebody living up in Scotland. And I went up to the house that I'd put down as my address in Scotland. And as I arrived there, the police turned up saying, "We're here on behalf of Lincolnshire Police. Apparently you've complained about some transphobic hate." And that's it. They deployed police officers on the basis of 3 minutes and 45 seconds of me winding them up. That's how crazy it is. So this system has been thoroughly weaponized by activists, by troublemakers, and by complete and utter lunatics. In my case, this Mrs. B character who reported me is a total lunatic. Now, I'm not supposed to know who Mrs. B is because they're subject to a court order, but I do know who Mrs. B is. I've got the identity of Mrs. B, and I can tell you exclusively, Megan Murphy, that they've been doing this kind of thing since at least 2013. They've been reporting people and threatening people since at least 2013. They're absolutely crazy. So it's no wonder that the College of Policing hid their identity, because had the College of Policing revealed their identity to us, we'd have gone, "This is absolute nonsense. You cannot have a victim who behaves like that. It's not possible." And therefore, they redacted their entire history. They gave them a new name. They hid them from sight so we could not scrutinize who this complainant was. But unfortunately, I have friends in high places in Merseyside, and they have let me know precisely who Mrs. B is. I'm not at liberty to say, but I am able to say that they are a complete and utter serial lunatic. And the police not only collude with these people, but they encourage these people. It's crazy, Megan.
So tell me what it is that you're trying to do about this. I mean, do you think that there's any way to get rid of this system, this process?
Well, in 2 weeks' time, we're at the Court of Appeal, which is the second highest court in the land. One above that is the Supreme Court. So we're taking this ridiculous guidance through the courts again, and hopefully this time we'll have a judge who doesn't bottle it, because this time we've got 3 judges who we will be presenting to, and we're hoping that they see the lunacy of this system. Because how can you have a non-crime hate incident that doesn't need any hate, that doesn't need to be an incident, that can have an anonymous reporter, okay, that stays on somebody's file for 6 years, which can ruin their life via an enhanced DBS check? How can you possibly have this? It defies logic. It defies natural justice. And so, we truly believe that we're going to win. But the other thing is, of course, their argument last time round was that collecting these non-crime hate incidents was necessary in order to prevent crime. But as our freedom of information requests have shown, there's not a single crime, not a single crime has been prevented as a result of collecting non-crime hate incidents since 2014. So we feel as though we've got a very, very good case, and I think we're going to win. God, I hope so, because it's costing me an absolute fortune. That's the truth of the matter, and that's another thing. Though, it seems to be entirely wrong that it should be down to individuals like myself, like Kira Bell, to bring these massive challenges through the courts at either our own expense or by begging for money through crowd funds and crowd justice and all the rest of it, because these are difficult times. These are difficult times financially. People are on furlough and people ain't got a lot of spare money. But it's by people throwing in fivers and tenors and sometimes a little bit more into these funds that we're able to hold authority to account. But we all of us, we get weary of having to open up our pockets and throw into yet another crowd justice fund. And I entirely understand that, and that's why I desperately hope that we win, so that we can get our money back and it doesn't bankrupt me.
I hope so also. I'm curious to know, I mean, do you think that there should be any hate speech law at all? Do you think that there are certain words or there's certain things that should be categorized as hate speech in a criminal sense?
No, I don't. I don't at all, actually. I think what I think the most that there should be, and this is how the law stands at the moment, is that if somebody is found guilty of a crime, and it can be shown that the motivation for the crime was distinct hatred of a particular group, then maybe I'm not entirely convinced myself on this, but maybe there's a case for an uplift in sentencing. But again, I'm not sure, because if somebody comes and punches me on the nose, I'm not entirely sure that it's worse that they punch me on the nose because I happen to be a Jew, for instance, or whether I'm not a Jew, but you know what I'm saying, or whether. Does that make it worse? I really don't know. I suppose there is an element of, if it's designed to instill terror and fear into more than the one person who is the subject of the assault, then I suppose I can see a certain rationale for an uplift in sentencing, because, you know, by attacking me, the purpose of attacking me was to attack the wider group. Then maybe, but I'm uncomfortable with the whole thing. That's the truth of the matter. I'm very uncomfortable with it.
And I mean, you say that it hasn't, you don't care, you know, like you're financially secure. It doesn't impact you in the same way that it might impact many other people, for example. But I mean, when this first happened to you in 2020, did it have an impact on you personally?
Yeah, it had a huge impact on me personally. I'm absolutely massive. It had an impact on me. It had an impact on my work. I didn't step foot back in my place of work for over a year because I needed to give my work deniability about their contact with me. You know, I owned the company, but in order that they might say that I have no dealings, everyday dealings with the company, honestly, you know, I stepped entirely back. I didn't step in the place for well over a year. Because it's difficult, you know, when you're dealing with customers and employees, and in the local press, an assistant chief constable has gone on the record of saying this person is a transphobic hater who is likely to escalate to criminality. That's hard. That's hard. So I took a massive step back there. I've lost a few friends, not many. My family are broadly supportive. In fact, very supportive, actually. But I have family who are in the police force, and it's made it very, very awkward for them because, you know, as I became more widely known, people were putting two and two together and realizing that my family members were related to me, and questions were asked. Now, fortunately, I was entirely vindicated at the High Court a year ago. So most of those questions that hung over my integrity have now entirely gone. They're gone. That's done. So now we're in this fight. We remain in this fight for the principle of the thing, because Douglas Murray says that those of us who are in a position to do this sort of stuff, there's an extra burden on us to actually do it, because most people have got a massive hierarchy of human resources above them. They've got bosses, they've got mortgages, etc., and they simply cannot afford to do this. Therefore, it falls upon those of us who are in the fortunate position where we can fully enter the fight to do so. And I come from that great tradition of English people who don't look for trouble, but if trouble comes looking for us, then we're not going to back down. And that's my position. You know, I like nothing more than watching football, watching Netflix, walking the dogs, just living an easy life. But that option's taken away from you when the police come knocking and start exercising their alien Orwellian authority on you, and you think, well, I didn't ask for this trouble, but the trouble's come literally knocking at my door. Am I going to be a coward and back away? I've had a number of people, including reporters, say, why don't you act like a normal person and just take it on the chin? And my response is, why would I take something on the chin from a police officer who's got everything wrong? I'm just not going to do that. I'm not going to do it, because our freedom, the freedom of England, and in actual fact, the freedom of the entire Western world, the freedom of the free world, in actual fact, rests upon unreasonable people like me, and unreasonable people like you, and unreasonable people like Posey Parker and Graham Linehan, and there's a few of us standing up and going, screw you, just screw you. We don't care what it costs, screw you. You want to fight, bring it on. We are going to keep fighting, and we'll fight and fight and fight. Not because we enjoy fighting, but because something much greater is at stake. And it's, for whatever reason, it's fallen upon us to stand up for freedom and what's right and logic and rationality and the rule of law, as opposed to the rule of draconian ideology. So yeah, I think that's the reason why. But yeah, it's had a massive hit on my finances, absolutely massive. You know, who can afford to be spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on bloody lawsuits? And it's had a huge impact at times on my mental health, absolutely enormous. It's just over a year ago, before the first court case, I took a long walk. I took a long walk in the middle of October, wearing nothing but my sandals, shorts, and a t-shirt into the night. I ended up walking 30 miles over the Humber Bridge, having contemplated just throwing myself off, because taking on the police, taking on the government, taking on authority, it's so damned wearing. It just is. It's heartbreaking. It does your head in. You end up thinking, could I have done something different? Is it actually my fault? What am I doing? What am I putting my family through? And it does your head in. It does your head in. But you just got to suck it up. Suck it up, buttercup, and crack on with it. That's my attitude.
Well, I mean, yeah, as you say, you know, somebody has to stand up. Somebody has to do it. And unfortunately, it's a very difficult thing to do, and you often suffer as a result. And I'm sorry that you've gone through all this. I just can imagine the toll it's taken on you. And you know, it's completely unfair. It's so wrong. It's shockingly wrong, and it's terrifying. But if somebody doesn't stand up, I would hope that more people would, because if anyone has read 1984, they should know exactly where this leads. And it's unfortunate that more people have not. I actually reread it recently, just, you know, a couple of weeks ago, and watching the direction that we're going in many countries, including Canada. You know, it's a very important warning to us all. So I hope that everyone, I'm certainly grateful to you for standing up and for going through all this, to push back against something that is extremely dangerous. I wanted to ask how people can support you if they would like to.
Okay, so if you type into Google Harry Miller, crowd justice, it will come up. If you go to faircop.org, you'll find the link to the crowd justice. Or if you go to We Are Fair Cop on Twitter, the pinned tweet, I think, will take you to the crowd justice fund. And every penny, dollar, shekel, or simply you know, words of encouragement and goodwill, all of it is massively, greatly appreciated.
Great. And I'll, of course, post those links in the show notes. I thank you so much for talking with me. It was really great. I remember I met you when I was in the UK.
Yeah.
And it was so great that you came to introduce yourself to me. I'm really sorry about I'm recovering from a cold, as I mentioned to you.
No,
so I've been like chugging water, and my eyes are watering. And
you know full well, if you've got the symptom, if you've got a cold, you've actually got coronavirus. You know that, and I know that.
You've all witnessed my last interview ever. Sorry, that's a very morbid joke. It feels like having a cold is illegal these days, so I'm trying to hide it, but I can't.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, thank you. It was really great to talk with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. I wish you all the luck in the world, in your appeal, which is in 2 weeks. Is that right?
2 weeks time. Yeah. I think it's the 8th to the 11th or 8th to the 10th of March or something like that. I mean, unfortunately, it's going to be via remote hearing, like through this, because last year it was fantastic to be able to stand on the High Court steps and go, hurrah! But we're not going to get that that opportunity this year, I don't think. Except, of course, when the judgment finally comes through and we've won, possibly in May or June or something. Maybe then we'll be able to do it. I really hope so. But anyway, Megan,
so
I just want to thank you because people like you have massively inspired me, and it's watching what you do, and Posey and these other absolute heroes of free speech, which have inspired me. So, thank you.